to Voice in the Wilderness Ministries, and this question is: where was Jesus during the 3 days he was dead? Or where was he when his body was lying in the tomb? His spirit obviously had departed his body, so where was it? It's a good question, and I'm going to try to answer that quickly today. Well, we know first of all that it was not in the tomb. He was separated from his body. He was not in heaven. We know that because we find out in John 20, verse 16 through 17, he tells Mary, "Touch me not, for I have not yet ascended to my Father." Okay, so we know he has not yet gone to the Father, and he tells her not to touch me. Basically just means don't cling to me. I have not yet ascended to my Father. I'm on my way up to see my Father. Don't delay me. And so we know that he actually says, "I ascend unto my Father, and to your Father, and to my God, and to your God." So it's very clear where he is going. Therefore, he has not been there. And he's going to say to her, basically, I'm going up there. I have not been there yet. So that implies that he's somewhere else. So where has he been? It's a good question. And if we follow this through the Bible and just by comparing scriptures, we'll actually get a pretty good idea where he was. Because he tells the thief on the cross, he tells him where they are both going to be that same day. And he says to the thief on the cross, "Today thou shalt be with me in paradise." And he doesn't use the word heaven. That's very interesting. He doesn't say, "Today you'll be with me with my Father in heaven." He just says, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Now, if you follow where this is going, you say, well, where is paradise? Well, we know that paradise was a place for Old Testament saints. These are saints that have died in God, in the faith, before the death and resurrection of Christ. We know that it was a place, and I'll show you in a minute where it is, but it was a place where the dead souls departed. And it is called in the Old Testament in Hebrew Sheol, or the grave. And it doesn't literally mean actually the literal grave that you're in, but it's a place where souls depart to go there for a time. And we find out from Jesus that and the reason we know it's Sheol and all that is David even says, he says when his child dies from his adulterous relationship with Bathsheba, he says in 2 Samuel 12:23, "I shall go to him, my son, but he shall not return to me." Okay, so David knows where his son is. There's no question where his son is. He knows his son is not in hell. That's another sermon. But he is going to his son, which is in Sheol, or the grave. Okay, so he goes down, and I'm going to go down on my outline here. And it says in Luke 6:22 through 26, Jesus is going to tell us a little bit about this place called Sheol, or the realm of the dead, because he says there was a rich man and there was a poor man named Lazarus. The poor man dies, goes to Abraham's bosom. The rich man dies and goes to hell. Okay, so hell and Abraham's bosom are both places where dead people go, depending on how they have lived as far as faith in God or rejecting God. And we know that they're very close together because he says in that story that the man looks over and sees Lazarus. The rich man sees Lazarus, sees Abraham, and he calls over to Abraham, and they can actually talk. That's how close they are. But Abraham says, "I can't help you. Lazarus can't help you. Besides, there is a great gulf fixed between us so that neither of us can cross to the other side." So we have, and we don't know exactly what it looks like. Obviously, a lot of people think it's in the center of the earth, and I actually do, and I'll show you why in a minute. But we know they're close together, and we know they're in the same. They're separate, but they're together. They're in one larger chamber, but there's two side chambers to it. Okay, at least two that we know of. All right, and Peter says of Jesus in 1 Peter 3:9 that he preached unto spirits in the prison. Okay, so they're being held there for a time. All right, the souls that die previous to Jesus' atoning work on the cross, they are saints of God, but they are being held there in the grave because the grave has not yet been conquered. The grave will be conquered when Jesus raises from the dead, and we're going to kind of get to this in a second, but he's going to take everyone there with him in Abraham's bosom, or paradise. The words are used interchangeably. and he's going to take them out with him. And this is spoken of several times. In Acts 2:31, it says that while Jesus was in Hades, or hell, it's not really hell. I just gets confusing. Hades and Sheol are kind of the same exact words. You have Hades in Greek, Sheol in Hebrew. Hell would be a specific reference to the bad side of Sheol, not the place you'd want to go. And I know a lot of times that word is translated hell, but the word there is speaking of Sheol, and anyone who knows any Hebrew at all understands that. And hell is sometimes even used as a reference to the grave, or as a reference to Sheol. So I know that sounds confusing, but hopefully that will not be an issue to anyone who knows anything about this. All right. Acts 2:31 says that while this happened, he says that Christ's soul was not left in hell, neither did his flesh see corruption. There's a lot of preachers saying that Jesus Christ went to hell in the sense that he went to the torture side of Hades or Sheol, and that he suffered for 3 days in hell. That is nowhere found in the Bible at all. Jesus was completely innocent. He said, "Today to the thief, you will be with me in paradise, not you will be with me in hell." So that entire argument is completely false. That is false teaching, and there's just no Bible basis for it whatsoever. Paul says in Ephesians 4:8-10 that Jesus led captives up out of there to heaven, took them with him to heaven. Okay, so he took the spirits of saints with him out of there to heaven. These are Old Testament saints, everyone from Adam all the way to basically the thief on the cross, or anyone else that died that day with faith in Christ, up until the time Jesus raised himself from the dead. Jesus said in Matthew 12:40, excuse me, that for as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Well, you figure out where that is all you want. I kind of believe that's in the middle of the earth. The Jews believed that all throughout the Old Testament. That was their understanding of it. What did Jesus do in the time between going down there and then coming back up to heaven? Well, it says in Hebrews 9:12 that once Jesus ascended out of there with the captives, once he ascended and once he got done talking with Mary and he went back up into heaven, that he took with him those people. He led captivity captive, is what Paul says in Ephesians 4. But then it says in Hebrews 9 that Jesus entered into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. And I know some of you are thinking, does that mean he went into the holy place in the temple? Well, remember, the tabernacle and the temple were shadows and copies of the heavenly reality. God told Moses to make all these things as copies of the heavenly models. Even the Ark of the Covenant is a copy of the heavenly. There's the Ark of the Testimony, the Ark of the Covenant that was on earth, and I believe it's still here, by the way. And then in heaven, John saw the Ark of the Covenant, but I believe it was the heavenly reality. It was the real Ark that God made, not the one that Moses had made. It could have been, but I don't believe so based on that text. So Jesus, it says he goes in and he sprinkled his blood on the heavenly temple. He sprinkled his blood on the actual mercy seat. And so when he did that, everyone from that point on who died in Christ does not have to go down into the center of the earth, into Sheol, or into paradise. They go straight into his presence because death has now been conquered. There's no victory. There's no power in death. Death has no victory. It has no power at all. And Paul writes about that. The grave has no power over anyone now because Jesus has overcome the grave. So I hope that helps you. Have a nice day.